Good evening and welcome. Tonight, Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 warns against use of hydroxychloroquine and says it is not clinically approved. They also apologize to essential workers over treatment by security operatives. Lagos State government adopts home isolation model for treatment of COVID-19 patients. Sultan of Sokoto orders suspension of all Eid al-Fitr prayers, marking end of Ramadan fasting period. The Sultan asked Muslims to pray from home. Finance Minister says latest figures from Bureau of Statistics, shows Nigeria's economy will go into recession as a result of COVID-19. And the UK government to invest up to £20 million in Africa to tackle coronavirus. Plus business, news from Abuja, the FCT, and later from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, Nigeria's headline inflation surges to two-year high, climbs for the 8th consecutive month in April.
Sports news, American boxer Mike Tyson is seriously considering a rematch with Evander Holyfield, 23 years on from their last bout.
And from Abuja, 5 years after abduction of 13-year-old Ese Oru, the Federal High Court in Yenagoa sentences her abductor to 26 years in prison.
The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 is asking Nigerians to stop buying hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for the coronavirus. At the Daily News Conference today, the chairman of the task force, Mr. Boss Mustafa, also clarified the exemption of essential workers from the 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew, apologizing to those who were harassed by security agents. Our correspondent, Kayla Megwa, has more.
I welcome you to the national briefing.
The briefing began with an apology to essential workers who in recent days have been harassed by security operatives for breaking the curfew.
I would be upfront to offer apologies to all of you that have suffered some form of treatments that are not expected to have been meted out to you in the course of the execution of your several duties across the nation.
The Minister of Health gives details of the 200 dead from the virus in Nigeria, stating that surveillance, contact tracing and testing is growing. He also answered questions on the call for waivers on medical supplies to be extended to other drugs.
There are waivers that will be given straight away for anything that has to do with the COVID-19. As for routine medication, drugs that have been donated and again brought by organizations that want to use it for the poor and vulnerable apply for a waiver. Those that are coming in for commercial purposes, those who are doing business, have a rate that they pay to customs. So it doesn't depend on what you are importing, it depends on the purpose and also on the destination.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs updates on the evacuees from Saudi Arabia who he says are in isolation centers. He also updates on other evacuees who have completed the 14-day quarantine and Nigerians around the world who are asking to come home.
We actually had a fourth batch that came in 2 days ago from Saudi Arabia. Nigerians who had gone for Umrah and who were caught there. There was some miscommunication as we were not ready at the time to receive anybody actually. There are Nigerians still all over the world trying to come home. I urge them to continue to bear with us, be patient, because the reality is that we can only process a certain number.
Another apology by the Minister of State for Education is issued to blind students across the country who right now cannot join their classes online with their classmates. while the national coordinator of the PTF calls on states to take responsibility in the response to the virus. The chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 says there is a need for state-level actions to align with federal guidelines for any success to be recorded in the fight against this pandemic.
God bless Nigeria.
Kayla
Good night.
Megwa, Channels Television News.
In the meantime, the coordinator of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has appealed to Nigerians to avoid large gatherings as the Eid al-Fitr festivities approach. Mrs. Sani Aliyu explained that it is still essential to maintain physical distancing and other preventive directives, such as wearing of face masks in public places during the Eid public holidays. He warns that the Muslim faithful must avoid being infected with COVID-19 in order to celebrate more festivals ahead.
I would like to make the public aware that as we go into Salah and any other public holiday period where people congregate, where people visit each other, in a pandemic situation where the epidemic is clearly going into the exponential phase. Not only is it risky, but it is unwise for you to go into large groups of people without any protection, with no face mask, without respecting physical distancing, putting aside all the mass gatherings. You're asking for trouble. And that trouble will not come immediately. It will come in the following weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, when that large congregation of people end up being infected. And in the long run, do you want to be alive for the next Salah, or do you want to enjoy this Salah, especially if you are at risk, and then possibly not be around for next year? Is it going to be one big bang and then you're gone? Or do you want to delay things considering the unusual circumstances we're in and continue to enjoy future Salahs with your loved ones?
Staying with the approaching festivities, the Sultan of Sokoto, Alhaji Muhammad Sayyad Abubakar III, has directed the suspension of Eid al-Fitr congregational prayers in the outskirts of towns and cities across the country. He's also asked Muslims to observe the Eid al-Fitr prayer at home with family members or alone in the case of an individual living alone. A statement from the Secretary General of the Jamaatul Nasril Islam, Dr. Khalid Aliyu, advises that states where governments have reached decisions to observe the Eid prayers, strictest measures of distancing, face masks and sanitizers must be observed. Here in the nation's commercial capital, Lagos, it's still standing by its forecast of between 90,000 and 120,000 cumulative cases of COVID-19 by the end of July. This was the submission of the State Commissioner for Health, Professor Akin Abayomi, at a press briefing today. Professor Abayomi also says the state aims to regularize home isolation, especially for cases whose first test comes back negative after being treated at its isolation centers. Our correspondent Mary Alale Yusuf reports.
It looks like the long-awaited peak of Nigeria's COVID-19 outbreak is still a long way off, as Nigerians are being asked to expect a steady rise in the daily number of confirmed cases. Lagos State, however, is satisfied that the trend is expected and containable.
We have not reached our peak yet, but the graph and the rate of increase of new cases is very gentle. And that is what we defined by our model. Maybe by next week, we might be seeing 250 or 300 per day.
The state is adopting a slightly altered model of management owing to the expected rise in cases and people who test positive yet hide from treatment.
People who get a positive test are reluctant to be admitted, maybe because of the stigma, which is one of the reasons why we as government are trying to transition to home care, home-based, because it's happening anyway.
The Commissioner for Health is hopeful that results from 2 separate drug trials, one by the WHO, will start coming in and will provide useful insight for management of the disease.
We are about to roll out the chloroquine trial or the hydroxychloroquine trial, and it's in 2 arms. We have our own trial, the Lagos State trial, which is a double-blind. There is the WHO Solidarity trial as well, which we are also participating in. And at the end of maybe in about 2 months from now or a month from now, we should start to get some information out of these trials, how our people in Lagos are responding to the use of chloroquine, either as a prevention or as a treatment.
Above all, he says, COVID-19 is likely to immunity in the majority of the population who get mild infections, and it will eventually burn out. Mary Alale Yusuf, Channels Television News.
Staying in Lagos, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu's government is also working towards adjusting the state's economy to adapt to the changes caused by COVID-19. That's why he slashed the state's 2020 budget, with the total expenditure now pegged at 920.5 billion naira. That's less by 248 billion naira than the earlier 1.68 trillion naira. The state government, through the Commissioner for Economic Planning and Budget, Mr. Sam Igube, explains that the new figures would be presented to the House of Assembly for approval soon. He adds that some of the factors that necessitated the review of the budget include fall in crude oil prices with damaging effects on statutory allocation expectations, downward pressure on its internally generated revenue, devaluation of the naira, reduced public and private sector investments, among other things, which all portend lower gross domestic product growth and increased unemployment as well. From the southwest to the northwest, 14 new cases of COVID-19 have been confirmed in Jigawa State, and all 10 of them are Almajiri repatriated from Nasarawa State. The Commissioner for Health, Dr. Abba Zakari, who announced this to journalists in Dutse, the state capital, explained that 10 patients have also been discharged after testing negative for the second time. Dr. Zakari, who also doubles as the chairman of the state's task force on COVID-19, says the proposed molecular laboratory for COVID-19 testing will start operations on Monday, May 25th.
We received some results this morning, and from this result, 14 patients are positive. And out of the 14, as usually, you know, we have a lot of Almajiris which were repatriated from the state. 10 of them are Almajiris. 2 of the patients are from Dutse, 1 is from Gumel, and then another one is from Enkwat. The other issue is about our laboratory. Our equipment have arrived, the molecular laboratory for COVID-19 testings. Our equipment have arrived. They are being installed currently.
It's not a case of repatriation in Ogun State, where operatives of the Nigeria Immigration Service have arrested 24 persons at the Agilite and Ilase border posts at Idiroko for defying the directive on border closure. In a statement, the spokesperson of the service explains that 14 Togolese nationals were arrested in a bus at Agilite, while 10 Nigerians were arrested at the Ilase border post. 5 of those arrested are reportedly victims of human trafficking and will be handed over to the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons. The statement adds that all those arrested have been profiled accordingly after health officials subjected them to COVID-19 tests in line with NCDC medical procedure. In part 2 after the break, Kano Varsity students produces solar-powered infrared temperature scanner and other equipment to fight against COVID-19. Stay with us. Welcome back. If it has joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 kicks against ban on religious gatherings by some state governors, lifting of essential and also apologizes to essential workers over treatment of security operatives. Lagos State Government adopts home isolation model for treatment of COVID-19 patients. Sultan of Sokoto orders suspension of all Eid al-Fitr prayers, marking end of Ramadan fasting period. The Sultan asks Muslims to pray at home. Finance Minister says latest figures from Bureau of Statistics shows Nigeria's economy will go into recession as a result of COVID-19. And the UK government to invest up to £20 million in Africa to tackle coronavirus. That's business news from Abuja, the FCT, and later from our studios in London. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores.
I know of some small people whose businesses are closed because even after signing into law that they should stop collecting tax, I still find people giving political appointment for a completely different thing. And you see them go back to these same people and dragging them and seizing and closing their shops.
That was an emotional Governor Ben Ayade expressing his disappointment over the illegal activities of Cross River State tax consultants despite the hardship caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Professor Ayade described those activities as an attempt to discourage establishment and expansion of infant industries. As part of COVID-19 palliatives, the governor has exempted small and medium-scale businesses, peasant farmers, commercial transport operators, food vendors, hotels, and with less than 50 rooms, and people struggling to earn a living from paying taxes.
If we have to pay tax, let me contact the anti-tax agency. They will give us a tax code whether we fall under the category of those to pay tax or not. So your vehicles, your public life, your telephone numbers will be in the public domain because everybody must call you to clear whether they have to pay tax or not to pay tax. I never knew that 5 years into office as governor, I would still find somebody who could live in a tax house in Cross River State. I almost cried because I knew how prepared I was, but it didn't end the way I had dreamt for the state. And I just think that somewhere God will just help me because I really wish I could really help. I really wish I could help. It's very painful, truly. I can't put 5 years and I've not been able to do the change I wished.
Ayade trying to hold in his emotions. We move up to the north now. Nigeria now sees innovations as part of efforts at combating COVID-19. The latest is from students of Kano State University of Science and Technology who have designed and manufactured solar-powered infrared human temperature scanners and automated hand sanitizer dispensers. The management of the institution says the goal of the innovation is to flatten the COVID-19 curve.
Since recording its first COVID-19 case on Saturday, April the 11th, Kano State has stayed on the radar. By the last announcement by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, the Northwest State has a total of 847 confirmed cases, the second highest nationwide after Lagos. Now the State University of Science and Technology is joining the search for an end to the pandemic. This solar-powered infrared human temperature scanner is designed by students of the Department of Engineering. Another is this automatic sanitizer dispenser machine, also solar-powered.
When one puts his or her hand under, when the sensor reads the hand, it will now dispense and make a sound. The reason why we make the sound is, for example, you know some people, they may try to skip the process. So if we keep it there by the door, you have the receptionist there. So provided the receptionist sees someone coming in without hearing the sound, it means he didn't sanitize his hand.
The school management sees this as part of the university's contribution towards finding a localized solution to the pandemic.
The pandemic has actually made us to wake up to the call of the academics, not only here but in all other institutions of the Federation. And what we are witnessing today is really the initiative that actually we are able to make in order to fight against the spread of the coronavirus.
So far, 10 of the machines have been fabricated with plans to make more. As they say, necessity is the mother of invention. That surmises this atmosphere here. If such efforts are given the right support, the nation's quest for a well-developed and functional, creative and innovative hub may no doubt become a reality.
Going to toss it over now to Linda Kigwe in Abuja for more on the news at 10. Hi, Linda.
Hello, Amarachi. Good to see you. Now, some orphanages in the Federal Capital Territory are smiling despite the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is because the Preli Foundation is continuing its rounds of distribution to the less privileged children. This time, 3 orphanages in the Federal Capital Territory have benefited.
The Preli Foundation truck of goodness keeps rolling.
But you know, Lube,
this time to 3 orphanages in the Federal Capital Territory, beginning with the Halal Orphanage, Lugbe.
One of our utmost and very, very dear to our heart donors is our Haja Nefisat Mungunu. And here she is again today like she always does. She's always here with surprises. She comes here, and every time she comes here, we feel a whole lot of difference.
The Christ Foundation Orphanage Home, Kuje, which is about 45 kilometers away from the city center, is next. These beautiful faces are excited that for a long time they wouldn't have to worry about what to eat. The Preli Foundation says neither religion nor tribe matters when it comes to the welfare of less privileged children.
as you have always put the mind of these children in your mind, may the good Lord also remember you in the time of need in the name of Jesus. And we pray that your children will not become orphans like this ones in Jesus' name.
The final stop for the day is the Alan Sar home, also in Kuje. Happy faces greet the Preli team from the windows as food items and toys are offloaded from the truck. The Alan Sar home caters for about 250 orphans.
We all know what this pandemic have done to the country, to the economy, and the level of needs and poverty in the country. For people like this to remember us, to remember our children, God will remember them.
This organization was formed in order to reach out to both the Christians and Muslims. It does not matter your religion.
All three orphanages speak with one voice that Nafisa Monguno, through her Pretty Little Lives initiative, has continued to show that she holds children dear to her heart.
I'm glad to see some cheery news. Now, still in the nation's capital, Nigeria's earning for the first quarter of 2020 has shrunk by about 31%, with the GDP also expected to contract by as much as -9%. These are some of the grim projections discussed when the National Economic Council held its first virtual meeting today. Chaired by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, the meeting, however, resolved to ensure a more effective synergy between the federal government and sub-nationals, especially on issues relating to COVID-19 fallouts. Correspondent Ibrahim Adra reports.
It's the Council's first virtual meeting. The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, the 36 state governors, the Central Bank Governor, a Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning as some members of the Council.
On the economy, COVID-19
The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning briefed the Council on balances on the Federation's account.
That in the stabilization account we have as at today,
these balances are far from comfortable, as the economy lost 125 billion naira, representing about 31% of expected revenue for the first quarter of 2020. It could get even worse.
Net oil and gas revenue inflows to the Federation account in the first quarter of 2020 amounted to 940.91 billion naira. This represents a shortfall of 425.52 billion naira, or 31%, of the prorated amount that is supposed to have been realized by the end of that first quarter. The economic growth in Nigeria, that is the GDP, could, in the worst-case scenario, contract by as much as minus 8.94% in 2020.
The World Bank country director, who was invited to address the meeting, also painted a gloomy picture.
The World Bank maintains that the COVID-19 on Nigeria, the impact of the COVID-19 in Nigeria will lead to severe, amplified human and economic cost, which will move the country into a recession.
There are concerns on the ability of states to pay salaries.
I think most of the states are paying salaries already, but we have not seen the worst yet, so I will not be able to answer this question correctly until we see what comes up in the next part. That is when we will expect the worst case scenario on this fall in prices of oil.
The meeting is, however, confident that the various economic stimulus, including fiscal relief for states and a proposed $1.5 billion loan to states, may mitigate the effects. The Council went further to set up a committee to work with the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, with resolve to step up collaborations with existing committees in a bid to reduce the impact of what is clearly a dire situation for Nigeria and the rest of the world. From the Presidential Villa, Ibrahim Adra, Channels Television News.
And now to legal matters. It has taken about 5 years, but finally justice has been served in the case of Ese Oruru, a teenage girl who was abducted from her home in Bayelsa on August the 12th, 2015 by Yunusa Dahiru and taken to Kano. The Federal High Court in Yenagoa, the Bayelsa state capital, today sentenced Dahiru to 26 years in prison after finding him guilty of illicit sex, sexual exploitation, and unlawful carnal knowledge of a minor.
In August 2015, 13-year-old Ese Oruru, who was a GSS 3 student of the Community Secondary School, Okpolo, was abducted from her home in Bayelsa to Kano State by an 18-year-old northerner, Yunusa Dahiru, for the purpose of marriage. Alarmed by Ese's disappearance, Rose Oruru, mother of Ese, reported to the Bayelsa State Police Command. And after days of investigation, an officer of the police command went with her mother to rescue her daughter, a trip which was futile and later triggered national outcry.
When I call back Arafo, when I reach here, my daughter will follow the senior was say don't find us tire. Where she did I say no get her. He say she sit down before you look you not see her again. Since she be the look for us, she not see us. But after I don't you not see us, you not see the end again. I call work, I go where they are booking the day. I saw just read the cause one where they call the ID. You know say he don't say the keke way they ride the park go man, need the carry us go. He go change to Muslim, he go call Maria.
The then Inspector General of Police, Solomon Arase, had to intervene.
I have asked the Commissioner of Police to go through his files and actually ascertain if he has such complaints. If he has such complaints, we have the statutory responsibility to investigate such matters.
Back in Bayelsa, Yunusa was arrested by the State Police Command, and the movement tagged Justice for Ese Oruru began. And so it happened. Even though it took 5 years, the long arm of justice eventually fell on Yunusa as he is sentenced to 26 years in prison by the Federal High Court in Yenagoa.
If you look at the judgment, the court gave us ample time to call our witnesses. I think at our instance there are like 4 or 5 adjournments where the court indulged us to be able to call those witnesses, but they are not forthcoming. So there is nothing else we could have done.
Today, the justice we are seeking for has been done.
Ese has since reunited with her family, and her father will do all he can to cater for the needs of his daughter. But for Yunusa Dahiru, his journey to incarceration from the court signals the final chapter of his actions now that justice is served.
When the News at 10 returns, we have more updates on COVID-19. Plus, Nigeria's headline inflation surges to two-year high, climbs for the 8th consecutive month in April. That's in Business News. Join us again. You're welcome back to the News at 10, coming to you live from Abuja. The wheels of justice keeps turning, and two Chinese nationals facing trial on two-count charge of conspiracy and bribery have been granted bail by Justice Mohammed Saidu Sifawa of the Sokoto State High Court. Justice Sifawa, who is the Chief Judge of Sokoto State, granted the accused persons bail, saying the respondents have not been able to dislodge the presumption of innocence of the accused. The accused persons were granted bail in the sum of 5 million naira each and two sureties in like sum, one of whom must be resident in Sokoto and have a landed property with a certificate of occupancy. He also asked the accused persons to submit their international passports with the Chief Registrar of the courts. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari has signed the Executive Order 008 on Voluntary Offshore Assets Regularization Scheme, VOAS, October 2018. The VOAS gives all relevant persons and their intermediaries who have defaulted in declaration of their offshore assets the opportunity to voluntarily declare and regularize such assets. According to a statement from the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Executive VOAS will work closely with the Nigeria Financial Intelligence Unit, which has worldwide access to relevant financial information. The statement adds that relevant persons who voluntarily declare their offshore assets and pay the stipulated levy to the federal government of Nigeria will receive compliance certificates, allowing them to use their residual assets freely without hindrance. The recoveries accruing to the federal government of Nigeria will be used for essential infrastructure development for the benefits of Nigerians. Defaulters will be liable to pay a penalty on the total of such offshore assets. And that's all from Abuja. Back to you, Amarachi.
Thanks a lot, Linda. The National Assembly has received the revised 2020 budget from President Buhari. According to the chairman, Senate Committee on Appropriation, the upper legislative chamber received the policy documents on Tuesday, while the House of Representatives received theirs a day after on Wednesday, May 20th. Senator Jubril Barau announced this to journalists after a closed-door meeting with the Minister of Finance and the Director General Budget Office at the National Assembly. Senator Barau explained that the Finance Minister came to discuss the work done in amending the revised 2020 to 2022 MTEF and 2020 budget with members of the Senate Committees on Finance and Appropriation.
In line with the fact that we are always on the same page with the executive, in our zeal to make sure that this country comes out stronger, but not weaker, due to this sad period we are in, I will make it on a point of view to be on the same page with the executive. So we'll be interfacing. So what we are going to do here with the Minister of Finance and her team is a continuation of that process. So she's here, and sometimes with fresh ideas, and we always discuss and then in order to find a common ground on issues. I feel I need to address to tell you why she's here. We would like to see her. It's something that we do not want it to be open. It should be off camera, so that you be in the know of what we're here for.
Meanwhile, the Armed Forces of Nigeria say 20 Boko Haram terrorists and 29 armed bandits have been killed in the last 1 week. Addressing the news conference in Abuja, the coordinator of the Defense Media Operations, Major General John Enenche, explains that the armed forces also recovered 4 locally fabricated machine guns, locally made rifles, and several pistols, among others. General Enenche also refutes claims that some sections of the country are being neglected by security forces.
In this operation, you recall that several members of Boko Haram terrorists and ASWAP fighters, senior commanders also were neutralized, and their logistics facilities, gun trucks, and other structures destroyed, as well as recovery of several weapons. These two occurred via our airstrikes and then ground operations. I will tell you that at the record stands at 20 BHT and ASWAP terrorists and some weapons, 6 AK-47, were recovered. That record still stands, but like I told you earlier on in this aspect of the briefing, that I've been receiving updates, and I will do that, if not next week, but put it together with the monthly update that we will have. Now, you look at Operation Hadar and Daji. Yeah, that one, the report was 27 neutralized, and then that was along the border between Zamfara and Katsina in airstrikes.
Business next. Here's BC Adebayo.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Welcome to Business News. Nigeria's headline inflation rate has risen for the 8th consecutive month to a 2-year high of 12.34% year-on-year in April, against 12.26% recorded in March 2020. Latest figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics today shows that the crucial food index rate increased to 15.03%, up from 14.99%, due to higher food prices, as measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus hindered economic activities and increased costs. Similarly, core index rate for the month rose to 9.98% compared to 9.73% in March. Urban inflation grew to 13.01%, while rural inflation rose to 11.73% from 11.64% in March. The Central Bank of Nigeria has rescheduled the Monetary Policy Committee meeting, earlier meant to be on Monday and Tuesday, May the 25th and the 26th, as a result of a public holiday declared by the federal government to mark Eid al-Fitr. A statement from the financial regulator says the meeting will now hold on Thursday, May the 28th. The CBN says it has put in place all necessary machinery for the meeting to now hold for only one day due to the ongoing COVID-19 national lockdown, and to align with the rules of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 and advisories from other relevant agencies. Industrial giant BUA Cement has reported stronger performance in its full-year financial result for the period ended December the 31st, 2019. In its latest earnings report, the cement maker posted 47.5% increase in its group revenue, which stood at 175.51 billion naira against 119.01 billion naira in December 2018. Similarly, the group's pre-tax jumped by 69.1% to 66.23 billion naira. Net assets soared by 17.8% to 363.69 billion naira. While its earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortization surged by 66.7% to 81.98 billion naira within the comparative period. BUA Cement, which is Nigeria's second largest cement company and among the stock exchange's top 3 listed cement equity company, has a combined installed capacity of 8 million metric tons per annum, and with plans on the way to increase existing capacity to 11 million metric tons through the commissioning of a new 3 million metric ton plant in Sokoto State by the first half of 2021. Investors at the domestic equities market gained 159.55 billion naira today as the all-share index rallied further by 1.25%. Ekaite Afia tells us more about today's trading activities.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. The total values of listed equities is nearing the 13 trillion naira level after more bargain hunting for bellwether stocks lifted the equities cap higher by nearly 160 billion naira at the close of today's trading on the NSE. Now, similarly, the market's main index climbed higher by 1.25% from Wednesday's figure, and this was largely driven by continuous demand for bank stocks as well as value stocks across 4 major sectors of the equities market. This comes as local and foreign portfolio investors maintain optimism for an increase in crude oil prices, which hit its highest level since March, as well as the easing of lockdown by the government. In price performance, Sunu Assurances led 28 other gainers up by 10%. Mid-cap construction company Arbico leads 4 other losers down by 9.91%, while Zenith retains top spot on the trades list for a second day as it contributed 57.42 million units to more than 350 million shares traded today. Thank you for joining us for the Stock Market Report. I'm Ekaite Afia.
Thanks, Ekaite. Meanwhile, global equities slid today on concerns about the long-term impacts of the new coronavirus and renewed U.S.-China tensions. Here are some of today's figures. And that's it on Business News. It's back to you, Amarachi.
Thanks, Missy. Still ahead on the news at 10, we have, still ahead on the news at 10, the UK government says it will invest up to £20 billion in the Africa Union's new Africa Anti-COVID-19 Fund to tackle coronavirus and save lives. We have this and more from our London studio and around the world in 5. Welcome back to the news at 10. The UK government says it will invest up to £20 million in the Africa Union's new Africa Anti-COVID-19 Fund to tackle the coronavirus and save lives, making the UK the largest national donor to the fund. The donation, revealed in a statement by the British Deputy High Commission in Lagos, would support African leaders and technical experts to slow the spread of coronavirus and save lives in Africa and worldwide. It will also provide important additional support to Nigeria and other African countries. Here's Simon Pusey now with more international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London for your international news around the world in 5. The World Health Organization has reported the most coronavirus cases in a day since the outbreak began, as the total number of global cases has approached 5 million.
Almost 2/3 of these cases were...
These grim milestones have played out unevenly across the world, with a rising number of COVID-19 cases in Latin America as Europe has begun to emerge from lockdown. Brazil has led the pack with the 3rd highest number of cases in the world after the US and Russia. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has followed Donald Trump's lead by promoting the use of hydroxychloroquine, a malaria drug, as a preventative medicine against COVID-19, despite medical and World Health Organization warnings against its use.
At this stage, hydroxychloroquine, norchloroquine have been as yet found to be effective in the treatment of COVID-19 or in the prophylaxis against coming down with the disease.
Meanwhile, the mayor of the Brazilian city Manaus, Arthur Neto, has said that he fears an indigenous genocide due to COVID-19, calling the deaths in his region a crime against humanity. Neto has demanded leadership from the federal government and President Bolsonaro in protecting indigenous lives from the virus. The virus has killed 103 indigenous people in Brazil so far and infected 610 indigenous people from 44 ethnic groups. That's according to data by the Articulation of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil. The United Nations has warned that refugee camps in Yemen are a ticking time bomb as coronavirus spreads in the country. Yemen has announced 72 confirmed cases of COVID-19 and 13 deaths so far, but health experts believe the real number is far higher given the lack of testing capabilities in the country. 400 out of every 1,700 refugee camps in Yemen have been identified as high-risk areas for the spread of the virus. China's annual high-level political meetings have opened with a minute's silence for the victims of the coronavirus pandemic that has claimed over 4,600 Chinese lives. The conference was delayed by 2 months because of the coronavirus outbreak and began its first session a day before the country's most important legislative congress. Issues expected to be high on this year's agenda include epidemic prevention and control, poverty alleviation, Hong Kong policy and job creation. At least 84 people have died in eastern India and Bangladesh after a powerful cyclone hit the region, leaving authorities struggling to carry out rescue operations amid the coronavirus outbreak. The Indian city of Kolkata has been especially devastated by Cyclone Amphan after thousands of trees were uprooted, electricity and telephone lines brought down, and houses flattened. The cyclone has weakened as it moves north into Bhutan. Burundians have voted in tense elections to replace their long-ruling president amid the coronavirus pandemic. The vote has come after 5 years of turmoil sparked by President Pierre Nkurunziza's bid for a third term, which unleashed unrest, leaving at least 1,200 people dead and 400,000 Burundians fleeing the country. Counting of votes has already begun in some states, and results are expected early next week. Meanwhile, Felicien Kabuga, indicted on charges of genocide related to the 1994 Rwandan massacre of around 800,000 people, has appeared before a French court following his arrest after 25 years on the run. Kabuga has been accused of bankrolling and arming the ethnic Hutu militias that waged the 100-day killing spree against Rwanda's Tutsis and moderate Hutus. The court will decide whether to hand Kabuga to a UN tribunal that handles crimes against humanity. Banging pots and pans, protesters have gathered in Spain's capital Madrid to call for the government's resignation over the handling of the coronavirus crisis. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has won parliamentary backing to extend lockdown for another 2 weeks, with restrictions remaining in force until June the 6th. This is the 5th time that a state of emergency has been renewed. The protests against this extension were backed by right-wing political parties. And finally, excited drivers honked their car horns as they waited for Australian singer Casey Donovan to perform live on stage at a free drive-in concert in Sydney. To ensure physical distancing, audience members were unable to leave their cars, but drivers could tune in to the concert on their radios to get full definition sound.
We're here because we love Casey Donovan and we just love the idea of this drive-in entertainment. This is just such a unique experience.
And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Time now for some sports news, and we started off with boxing. 53-year-old Mike Tyson is seriously considering fighting 57-year-old Evander Holyfield for a third time, but only to raise money for people in need. The iconic heavyweight rivals, who squared off twice in the 1990s, have posted training videos on social media, leading to speculation they are planning on running it back for a third time. It now appears that the trilogy is a real possibility after Iron Mike told TMZ Sports that fighting Holyfield for charity would be awesome, 23 years on from their last bout. Holyfield had said on Saturday that his team is already in talks with Tyson's representatives. The Minnesota Timberwolves and the Mayo Clinic are leading a league-wide study that aims to show what percentage of NBA players, coaches and executives have antibodies to the coronavirus. According to ESPN, Timberwolves Dr. Robbie Sika is spearheading the antibody initiative, which is expected to have the participation of all 30 teams. The antibody study is expected to be completed in the month of June. British Culture Minister Oliver Dowden says he is expecting guidance on when elite sports teams can resume full contact training, as well as when matches can be played behind closed doors. Dowden was speaking at the daily UK government briefing, where he also launched a task force to see how sport and art could restart safely following the enforced cancellation of events due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Premier League clubs have returned to small group and non-contact training. The Secretary General of the Supreme Committee for the 2022 FIFA World Cup, Hassan Al-Thawadi, is looking forward to a celebration of humanity in Qatar after the COVID-19 pandemic. Al-Thawadi believes the world will have recovered from the pandemic when the World Cup comes around in November to December of 2022. And that's sports news. Is back to you, Amarachi.
Thanks, Ayotunde. And the main news again. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 today found that some state governors who have lifted the ban on religious gatherings. The task force apologized also to essential workers over harassment by security officials. Also today, Lagos State government adopted home isolation model for treatment of COVID-19 patients. And the UK government today said it will invest up to £20 million in Africa to tackle coronavirus. That's News at 10 tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Good night.